reflecting on my knitting in 2025, I noticed that I made a few projects, bigger projects especially, like sweaters, where I enjoyed the design a lot and I enjoyed the process a lot, but I don't really reach for them as much as I maybe should, considering how much time and effort I invested into making a whole garment. And for 2026, I made it one of my goals to make very sure before casting something on that I know this will be something I enjoy to wear as well, not just enjoy to knit. And to achieve that, I made a little checklist for myself to go through every time I want to cast on a new project. And I thought it would be fun to share that checklist here while I knit on my first major project I chose in 2026. This is my ribbling sweater by Laura Penrose. I'm currently test knitting this for her and I am almost done, I would say. I'm missing a little bit of the body still, but we're getting there. You may work on something else while we talk, obviously. I got my needles stuck in my work already. It's going so well. So I'm going to share a little bit how I choose what patterns I want to make, what yarns I want to use, and how I make sure that what I choose fits in with my style and my wardrobe. So when choosing a pattern, I've always found it quite easy and intuitive to decide on a design that I like. So I was just scrolling through Instagram or Ravelry or Pinterest or whatever, and I would see a pattern or a picture of a finished object usually, and pretty clearly know, oh, I like these stripes, I like the color work on this, I like the cables or whatever. But then when I had the finished object, I realized that some of the features of this pattern aren't really practical for my life, or they don't look the same on my body, and therefore I've included a few features to pay attention to in a pattern in my checklist. The first one is sleeves. I find that when I look for patterns, I gravitate towards very long and wide sleeves. That's just something I find looks flattering. However, I've noticed, especially with this sweater, that in real life that's actually not very practical to me because, you know, I wash my hands and I wash dishes and my sleeves get wet. Or I'll be eating and they'll be in my food, or I'll get caught on things. I cannot tell you how many times I've run into a door handle with this and gotten my sleeve stuck in the door handle. Another feature I've added to my list is necklines. I've learned a few things about my neckline preferences. I really don't like when they're tight or come high up, especially not if the yarn is itchy. I really don't enjoy V necklines on cardigans. I just don't like the way it looks at all. I noticed that I really don't like if something slips off of my shoulder. It just annoys me throughout the day. And I'm sure other people will have other preferences there. I know that a lot of people pay attention to bra straps not showing through necklines. So that's definitely something I would also pay attention to when choosing a new pattern. I also have body length added to my list, which is something that is pretty easily adjustable in most patterns, but I guess in certain scenarios, depending on how some color work elements or structure elements are placed, that might be something you want to look at. For me, I really like when garments end at the top of my hips, I guess, so I don't want them to be too cropped, but I also don't want them to be super long. And I also really like when the amount of ease is the same at my bust than it is at my hips, or at least very similar. So if I have space here, I want space at my hips as well, and if it's tight here, I want it to be tight at my hips as well. And for my body proportions, that is something I do have to factor in before I decide on a pattern, because my hips are my widest points, so if something is tight at the bust already, once I get to the hips it will be too tight. And if something is loose here at the bust, that usually means that it might be tight at my hips, which is not really something I enjoy. So that is something I've tried to pay more attention to and make more adjustments for as well. And then lastly, I would say it also makes sense to pay attention to where the seams are placed, so the construction method. I always thought about construction more in terms of process knitting, like will I enjoy making a raglan sweater? Do I want to knit this in pieces and then seam it? So I paid more attention to, is this fun to do rather than is this nice for me to wear? I would say that I enjoy most types of construction methods, but I have encountered people who, for example, really dislike the amount of structure that you get from a saddle shoulder because it makes you look a little bit wider here, or I've met people who really don't like how flowy and slouchy a circular yoke looks on them. So that is also something that is worth thinking about. I've actually noticed with this that when I look into my wardrobe at my most worn store-bought sweaters, they are always drop shoulder sweaters. There's barely anything else even in there, even for my sweaters that I don't wear as much. However, I don't really knit drop shoulder sweaters. I have very few of them, but it's not really a construction method that I gravitate towards, just because I don't find it as fun to knit. And also, if there's any sort of design in the drop shoulder sweater, I don't really like the way that the sleeves are so separated from the body. So I would say that's something I should maybe include more in my knitting, but more for very basic items. Because if there's like a colorwork design, I don't really enjoy if this part of the design goes this way and this part of the design goes this way. I don't like the way that looks. So I think that's why I've stayed away from the drop shoulder sweaters up until now, for the most part. But I guess that's something I should include more if that's what I wear the most. So these are some considerations I try to think about before I make a choice on a pattern. And then I also have a little checklist I go through before deciding on a yarn. So for the yarn, the main thing I try to look for is that it fits the pattern and the garment that I'm making. So if I'm making a summer garment, I'm going to choose a summer yarn, and you know, if I'm making a warm sweater, I probably wouldn't go for cotton. So when choosing a yarn, it makes sense to stick as close as possible to what the pattern suggests, I would say. Something that I started paying attention to pretty quickly was how warm will this yarn actually be when I wear it, because a lot of patterns will suggest very, very warm, woolly alpaca yarns for sweaters, and then even for summer garments, like tops, they will still suggest like a merino wool, which I guess is cool if you live like in northern Finland, where it's the appropriate weather to wear all that. But where I live, it's pretty warm in the summer, and it's like also fairly warm in the winter. So I don't really need a ton of cold weather sweaters. I mainly just need something to throw on under a leather jacket for the most part of the year. And I have made a few sweaters with warmer yarns that I ended up not wearing as much, just because I can't find a good temperature to wear them in. Something else I am trying to pay more attention to is what fibers I actually like close to my skin. I've noticed that alpaca almost always feels itchy to me. I don't really have that problem with wool so much, so even a more rustic wool yarn will feel more comfortable to me than alpaca. So I still enjoy knitting with alpaca. I think it looks really nice. I really like the halo on it, but I've been trying to make sure that if I use alpaca, it is a garment that is not super close to my skin. So not a scarf or hat or a sweater that comes very high up, but I don't know, a vest that I can also put something underneath. And then something I'm guilty of not thinking about enough is the care instructions. So am I actually willing to maintain this once it is a finished garment? I feel like if you go for all natural animal fibers, like 100% wool sweater, for example, it's fine. It's not that bad, because most of the time you can just hang the sweater outside for a little bit. I feel like these items maintain themselves quite well. I've really been struggling with projects that have a mixture of synthetic fibers and animal fibers. So as soon as there's a synthetic fiber involved, I don't feel like just hanging it outside to air out a bit is quite enough. And I do feel like I need to wash it, but then also it has natural fibers in it, like animal fibers that can't be put in the washing machine, so you have to hand wash it. And then what annoys me most about that is actually not the process of hand washing it, but then having to put it somewhere to dry and laying flat, so it takes up so much space and takes so long to dry. So that's quite annoying to me. And I do want to try to work with more superwash fibers in the summer especially, just so I can throw things in the washing machine. That seems really practical. I haven't really tried a lot of those, if I'm being honest. I feel like once I started thinking about like fibers and what yarns to use and knitting more seriously, there was a whole movement going on knitting YouTube where people were very upset about superwash yarns, which is fair. I get that they might stretch more or that the longevity just isn't quite the same, so I understand that, but it is something that I want to try to use more and just see how I like that. So for the pattern and yarn parts of this video, I feel like that's more about will you make an individual item that you like. And now I'd like to talk a bit about how something that you knit fits into your style and your wardrobe, which I guess is more a question of will I actually reach for this and put it on in the end. So the first item on my list is what I like to call a lifestyle check. And that is just asking yourself, do I have occasions to wear this to? Can I wear this on a random Tuesday? What am I doing on a random Tuesday? Am I in an office? Am I at home on the couch? Am I on a hike? Am I at a coffee place? I don't know. Like, is there occasions in my everyday life where I would wear this item? That is something I forget more often than I care to admit, also when buying clothes from stores. And then the second thing I like to do is to make sure I have outfits and not just a finished object in the end. So I mentally go through all of my pairs of pants and I check whether there's any I can wear with this sweater. I check whether my winter jacket fits over the sweater. I check whether my thermo shirt fits under the sweater. I check if I have accessories or shoes or a belt that goes with the color, so that in the end I have something that is actually easy to style and not something I have to put a bunch of thought into if I do want to wear it every day. And then for color specifically, it also makes sense to not only check whether it fits in with the rest of your wardrobe, but also is this a color that you wear a lot outside of this one knitted garment that you're planning? Is this a color that looks flattering on you? And then for like structured knits, I would also check whether the structure will still be visible in a darker color. For example, for the sweater, this is a broken rib pattern, so there is some sort of a structure to it. And I was a bit worried at the beginning that you wouldn't be able to see it with the dark brown. And obviously if I go like pretty far away, it becomes more difficult to see. That is just something that I consciously decided I would be fine with. So if you're making that choice, just know what you're getting yourself into. And then what I also find interesting to think about is knitting to fill your wardrobe gaps. So kind of going about it the other way around, instead of finding a bunch of designs and inspirations and patterns and then trying to fit them into your pre-existing wardrobe, looking at your wardrobe and noticing what's missing and then knitting to fill that gap specifically. Because if you're noticing a gap there, then most likely if you put whatever item you're missing there, you will actually wear it. Are there any occasions that you struggle to get dressed for, or any temperatures that you struggle to get dressed for? So clearly you're missing something there. Or are there any items that you feel like you don't wear enough because you don't have anything that goes with them? So you might make something like that. Or the other way around, is there anything that somehow always ends up being in the laundry? So clearly you don't have enough of this. And then I also like to look at what do I put in my shopping carts, or if I go to the thrift store, what types of items am I trying to find there? What am I looking for? So that kind of helps me identify gaps in my wardrobe and then maybe fill them with knitting. I actually don't have enough gaps in my wardrobe. It's a problem. My wardrobe is actually pretty full. So that is kind of what I, most of the time mentally, but I guess you could also make a physical checklist, go through before I decide to start knitting a new pattern. And I found that this is really helpful. I think I did a pretty good job with this ribbling sweater that I'm knitting on. So for example, I've noticed that I gravitate towards wearing more basic designs because most of the time I want something that's easy to style and I don't want to think about what pants or shoes or whatever I want to wear with a sweater. So I went for something that is actually pretty basic in color. I even decided to not put any stripes on this, even though the original has stripes, because I knew that if I introduced a second color to this or anything that adds visual interest, I'm gonna struggle styling this more. So I made it very easy for myself and I just went for a dark neutral color that I can wear with everything. I also tried to fill a gap in my wardrobe with this, which is a tight sweater. I don't really have any tight sweaters, so I guess in some sense this is a bit of an experiment whether I will actually wear this. But also I did need something to put under cardigans or under blazers because I don't have anything that goes under there. And so far I'm pretty happy with the decisions on the pattern and the yarn and how this fits into my wardrobe. We will see how much I actually put this on once it's done. I guess you will see in the next podcast episode. I am determined to get this done before that, and I hope you're around for that, and I will see you next week.